Welcome back, and you're still with us on Breakfast Central. Today on Business as usual, we have Rotus Oddiri. He's the editor of Business Insider, and he's on Breakfast Central today. As you know, it's 2019, so let's talk about the big business stories from last week and the ones we definitely have to keep our eyes on. Good morning, Rotus. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning to you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the first story we'll look at is Francophone West African Countries drop CFA Franc. Now, all Francophone West African countries have agreed to change their name of their common currency from Franc to ECO and serve links from former colonial ruler France. Now, the Francophone countries' former denomination will now be replaced by the proposed ECO currency slated to launch next year. Now, how swiftly will this currency change take place across the Francophone West African countries? That's one question that, we have to debate about. So I'll put that as my first question, right. Rotus. How swiftly do you think this will take place?
Well, they're saying that this will take place by the end of 2020. So it's a reasonable amount of time to consider, since this is a regional currency that's going to be used by the West African Francophone nations. You have to think about the, trade logistics, using a currency amongst the different countries that are involved, and how long it will take for this integration to take place. So a year is reasonable, because this, again, they're just changing the name, right? If we're being very honest here, because this currency, despite the fact that they're going from the CFA franc to the ECO, it is still pegged to the euro. So, it's still essentially dependent upon how the eurozone currency moves, which of course has brought some stability, lower interest rates, and so on and so forth, and allowed them to avoid the macroeconomic fluctuations that have exogenous fluctuations that have affected the other economies around Africa. So from that perspective, they're saying that they will just at least take a full year for this to allow integration to take place. So we'll have to just wait and see if that happens.
A quick question: after 75 years, what do you think is the significance, of this?
If we're being honest, it's symbolic, and it is psychological. I mean, it's basically severing ties from the control that France has had over these economies. The CFA franc literally used to stand for the colonies of France, right? And then they moved it to the communities of African nations of France. So it's a symbolic and psychological thing, because 50% of their foreign reserves had to be kept with the French treasury. A member of France's Treasury Department had to sit on their central bank board. I think they're still paying some taxes to France. So they've been pushing for autonomy for quite a while. So it says, hey, look, we are freed in a way from the overview of to an extent, of the colonial overview of France. So that's really what this is about. But they are moving towards being able to manage their economies themselves, which will pose some of its own challenges, I have to say. But
okay, well, before I move to my next question, I want to know, what are some of the challenges you think?
Well, look, when you are pegged, if you look at the Eurozone, right? The Eurozone, for all intents and purposes, has been a stable currency. I know there's a whole Brexit issue going on there and stuff like that, but if you look at the integration within those economies, what is it? About 70–80% of trade within the Eurozone is intra, which is within the European countries, as opposed to us here in Africa, it's about 15–20%. So they're more stable. And again, when you are pegged to that euro, you have lower interest rates, you've got less volatility. When you now take out that, you now sever those ties, African countries are commodity dependent, so they have to, oil, cocoa, all these things, they have to sell them to somebody. And so if there are any, look at the trade war between the US and China. Anything that affects global demand or causes countries to be skittish and reduces demand will now affect African nations and what they're exporting. Look at what happened with South Africa and mining. Look at what happened to Nigeria and Angola with oil. So if you're severing ties from the euro and you're now going to be standing on your own, you've got to prepare yourself for the economic headwinds that could hit you and how strong you are.
And of course, the question is, because as of this morning, I hear that Ghana is planning, to join quite a big one there. How do you feel about that?
Well, it brings, some heft. Ghana is a solid economy in that. You're from Ghana. I just found that out this morning. So, solid economy. It brings a lot of credibility to that particular zone. However, the Ghanaians did say that they do not want that peg. They said said they want to have a flexible exchange rate that they would like to see. So, you know, Ghana, of course, they've been independent. We've got the CD, which was pegged to the dollar at one time. Now it's on its own. So, you know, it's a good thing for Ghana to say, but they've said it theoretically they want to join, but we'll see if they will actually follow that up with action.
But how do you think the Anglophone countries will be able to catch up to this as well?
Yeah.
It's one big question we have to look at.
The biggest Anglophone country, of course, is Nigeria. It makes up 60% or 70% of the activity within the region as far as the size of the economy is concerned. So now, again, the key, what all this is about is trade within the African nations, reintegration. Look at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and all of that. A single currency will allow you to be able to trade easily with your neighbors. It will allow you and I to travel within each other's countries without the use of a passport. You know, but the fact that the Anglophone African countries are still operating with their own currencies, that's going to take a lot of time for them to come aboard because everybody's still moving independently. So for that regional integration to happen, there were some conditions that they listed about inflation, as far as budget deficits and so on. Only Togo has met those conditions. So for Anglophone countries, for them to get to where this is happening, it's going to take unity, but it's going to take a while because there have to be a number of little complexities that have to be worked out individually from the countries before it can take place.
But quickly, how will this economic development affect other Francophone African countries, you know, as it stands?
Well, as far as the effect, look, again, this is the West African side. There's still the Central African countries who are still using the franc. So, look, as far as them being affected, it's still, the Central African countries are still going to be trading within themselves with the franc. So there won't be any, you know, major implications for them. So it's just that the trading unity has been reduced. Until there is full integration, they will not be able to take advantage of the entire bloc being able to use that currency for trade and so on and so forth. So for now, things are still moving as it is. Again, it's not going to be taking effect until, they hope, the end of 2020. The Central African Francophone countries will still be carrying on with the CFA franc. So things still move as is. As we say in Nigeria, the cocoa of the matter is when everybody tries to unify. So for now, things are as is. There really shouldn't be any adverse effects for now.
Okay, but closing on this, we're moving to the ECOWAS story. Closing on this, why should we keep an eye on the story?
Oh, I mean, we should keep an eye because this is supposed to be positive for the future of trade within Africa. Again, Africa sells stuff, right? Commodities. And we want to be able to sell stuff to ourselves. We want to trade more within ourselves to give ourselves a boost. So we should keep an eye on it because it is pretty much our economic future that we're looking at. And as far as the what we can get as far as income for more countries, you know, that's what we should be looking at. So it's important. We have to keep an eye on this going into 2020 and beyond.
Going into 2020. So you hear this is some of the stories, you know, we have to really look forward to in 2020. You heard it from Rotus. But anyway, let's move to the next story. Now, the Economic Committee of West African State has endorsed the candidature of African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina for a second term at the helm of the institution, citing a sterling performance in his previous term. Now, ECOWAS President Jean-Claude notes the bank's role in the continent transformation and calls for greater cooperation in order to fund projects in West Africa. Now, this brings us to our discussion. We want to find out what is the validity of this endorsement. Oh, wow. I mean, it's ECOWAS. If you're being endorsed by ECOWAS, you're essentially being told that you've done a good job in helping the countries within that region. What Mr. Adesina has done, he was appointed to his term in May of 2015, I believe, 5-year term. Now it's coming up to an end, and now they're saying he should get another 5-year term. It's credibility because the region, you know, the African Development Bank operates and finances a lot of countries within the region. So it's a big credibility boost for a body like that to be endorsing him. Well, let's talk about his tenure. What were some of the positive remarks during his tenure? Oh,
wow. He's done quite a lot. He won an award. He's the AABL award. He won an African of the Year award. It's for, I think it's AABL is African Business Leaders or so. So this was in December of this year. So back in, I think it was October, they had a shareholders meeting where their capital base for the African Development Bank increased by $115 billion. So it increased to about $208 billion, which is the largest capital increase that the body has seen since it was formed in 1964. What does that mean? That means that the body now is able to finance more projects across Africa. African nations need money, especially the smaller ones, the Guinea-Bissaus, Gabons, and so on and so forth. So they all need money for financing, and the African Development Bank has stepped in to provide the financing. In addition to that, he also has, he's also pushed forward a number of initiatives. Like back in February, he co-chaired a nutrition scorecard with the King, I can't remember his name, the King of Lesotho, who is a monarch there, which was supposed to allow African countries to face malnutrition for the youth. He's gender parity, a number of other things. So but the main thing is the capital base has been increased and how they're going to be able to fund more African countries within the region and help them to achieve their goals.
Yeah. But closing on this topic, what do you think should be some of his future plans for 2020? Oh,
wow. Poverty eradication, youth employment. I think those two are pretty large across, because we need to put more Africans to work. On this show, we've talked a lot about issues in South Africa with the companies closing down, unemployment for South African Airlines, ESCOM. We've talked about that in Nigeria. Putting Africans to work is one of the major issues there. So it's one of their outlooks and one of their mandates that they want to reduce poverty. They want African countries to be more prosperous. So financing is going to help that. And also the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, they've been very, very at the forefront of making sure that the operational aspects of that come together. So I think, but back to your question though, youth unemployment and also poverty eradication, those are the things that you're going to be looking at in 2020.
And I love the fact you spoke about employment. I think that's one big thing that we need to look out for in 2020. But closing in on this, we'll talk about the CBN, and CBN slashes banks' ATM withdrawal fee from 65 naira to 35 naira. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria has announced a reduced withdrawal fee charged for use of other banks' automated teller machines from 65 naira to 35 naira. Now, an additional list of subsiding bank charges include ATM card maintenance charges, account maintenance fee, and SMS notification fee. Now, we want to start the discussion with why did the country's apex bank take so long to come out with this development?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We should definitely be posing that to them. The timing is very interesting because this is happening at the end of the year. And why did they take so long? Because a number of people, it's a good question. I don't know why they did take so long. Just to explain for our viewers, you are allowed 3 withdrawals outside your bank network, and at your 3rd withdrawal, you get the 65 naira fee. So now they're reducing that to 35. What I would have liked to have seen is that the central bank allows the banks to compete with these fees. So if Bank A is charging 65 naira, Bank B says we'll charge 20 naira, Bank C charges 10 naira. Other banks in other countries do that. And so customers will move and allocate themselves depending on which bank has the lowest fee. But the central bank as regulator feels that it is in its capacity to control this, and it is better late than never, finally seeing that some of these fees are a little high and wanting to reduce them, thinking about consumers in mind. However, if you think about what's coming to Nigerians, of course CBN, of course the Central Bank of Nigeria, if you look at what's coming for Nigerians in the new year, VAT, value-added tax, is going up from 5% to 7.5%. There's talk of electricity tariffs going up. There's rumors of a possible devaluation to the dollar. It's 360 now. It could go to 390, 400. Rumors again. I'm not saying this is going to happen. Possible deregulation of fuel. Subsidies are very high for fuel subsidies in Nigeria. Nigerians could pay right now at the pump 145 naira at least. I think in Ghana you pay like 300 and something.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're market regulated, and so we might move there. So the speculation is that the CBN is doing this now to try to lessen the blow to disposable incomes of Nigerians because of what might be coming. Again, I'm just speculating, but they finally done it. It's a welcome initiative. Folks won't have to pay as much. Transfer fees and stuff are reduced, so we live.
But how would you think this will affect, customer relation towards, banks?
Oh, I mean, okay, well, for the banks, if you look at fee income for the banks, it's going to hit them because a number of these banks, I mean, the bank, your general modus operandi for a bank is to give out loans and so earn interest on loans. So interest income, of course, is supposed to be the cash cow for banks, but they have made quite a bit of money from fees, electronic fees and so on. So with this reduction, yes, they will see fee income for banks coming down. But as far as customer relations are, if you go on Twitter and other social media, Nigerians are loving it. They're happy with the fact that these fees have been reduced. We
are loving it too. I think in Ghana, with this is about 1 or 2 cities. So I was surprised when I saw it was 65.
Yeah, right. Of course, the CD is stronger than the naira, so you have to convert that. But yes, indeed. I mean, again, I like what you guys are doing over there. Ghana's market friendly. So, but we hope that Nigeria moves more towards that area where we can see the CBN just hands off and let the banks play in that space and determine the fees, and then customers will just move to who has the lowest, and there's more competition there.
Exactly. But before we wrap up, on this totally, what's your overall outlook, on this development? development?
Well, look, I mean, for the fees and so on, it's good. You know, you're reducing, because if you look at disposable income for the average Nigerian, it's not very high. You know, fees and everything. I've mentioned VAT that's coming next year, electricity tariffs. The Nigerian consumer has been hit pretty hard. So anywhere you can get some relief in paying less fees is a good initiative. However, I still maintain that it shouldn't be controlled by the central bank. You're the regulator, you should be regulating other venues. Let the banks compete and customers will move and gravitate to who has the lowest fees, and then you can determine market share. But generally, I'm happy. I don't get to pay as much ATM fees.
I'm happy too.
Exactly.
But anyway, I still have Rotus right here with me. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll look at those two stories that we should really keep our eye on. But we have African history today and African history today, so do enjoy this. We'll be right back, and Rotus is still with me. Stay with us.
Today in African history.
30 December. Former South African President Thabo Mbeki was greeted by Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir in Khartoum on the 30th of December in 2004. Mbeki was in Sudan for talks on the Darfur conflict.
All right, so you welcome back. I still have Rotus right here with me. But out of all those three stories that we spoke about, I want you to give me two that you think that we should really put an eye on. Those two stories that, you know, would really go far.
Out of the three or separate stories?
Out of the three we spoke about.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, for sure, we should definitely focus on what's going on with the currency, right? That's definitely one story that we should be looking at and should focus on, because as I've said, you are looking at the future of integration of trade within African countries. It is huge, you know, as far as export potential and earnings potential. Think about trading with your neighbor down the street as opposed to somebody in another town. So that definitely, economic integration with a single currency is something we have to definitely be looking at. The second one, I think, would definitely be the fees, as far as what's going. Yeah, the ATM fees, because that is hitting for our viewers that are watching. That's something that directly affects their pockets. So those two stories, going into 2020, seeing what else is happening, not just in Nigeria, across other African countries, as far as how central banks are integrating with banks and what it means for consumers, those are very, very vital that people should.
All right, and you still stand that central bank should be the regulator and not control it?
Yes, I mean, yeah, exactly. Allow banks to compete for fees. Let them set whatever fees they want. If I don't like a fee that the bank is setting, I'll find the lowest fee offered by another bank, and we'll all move there, and then competition will flow freely. Too much control from the central bank doesn't allow for too much innovation for banks to move around. So that's what I'm looking.
And I wish we could talk more, but our time will not allow us. So definitely, Rotus will still be on the show again. Thank you so much for talking to me.
To watch more videos just like this, make sure you subscribe right here, and of course, check out more videos right here.